When Tiger Woods stepped into the courthouse that morning, he expected a routine appearance. But before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The papers had been signed. The case was supposed to be settled quietly. As he walked into the courtroom, he could almost hear the distant applause in his mind from his glory days. The years had passed, but Tiger always felt a sense of nostalgia when he returned to his roots. What he didn't expect was the judge. Judge Beatrice Thornwald, a veteran with over 30 years of experience on the bench, stared at him over her glasses, her lips curling into a knowing smirk. Tiger had been in plenty of high-pressure situations, but this was different. "Mr. Woods," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she scanned through her papers. "I see you've decided to show up without any legal representation. Quite bold, don't you think?" Tiger's pulse quickened. He'd been preparing himself for a straightforward, if tedious, session. But this felt personal. The judge's eyes gleamed with amusement, and the room was still, the tension palpable. He gave a tight smile and cleared his throat. "Yes, Your Honor, I'm here to—" "You don't need to explain yourself to me, Mr. Woods. You're a billionaire, a legend. You should have the best legal team money can buy, yet here you are, fumbling through your case like a novice," Judge Thornwald interrupted, her tone mocking. The room erupted in low chuckles, and Tiger's grip tightened around his briefcase. His heart pounded faster. His calm demeanor was beginning to crack. This wasn't how he imagined the day going, not in the slightest. "I'm sure we can move past this," he said, his voice unsteady, but he couldn't hide the unease creeping into his chest. The judge's smile only widened. "Let's see if that's possible, Mr. Woods. I'm very curious to see how this plays out." Tiger's mind raced, his palms starting to sweat. He had no idea what was coming next, but deep down something told him this wasn't going to be a simple case. This was going to get ugly. As the judge's words lingered in the air, Tiger's breath hitched. Was this just a test of his nerves, or was there something more at play here? The answer, he feared, was coming faster than he could prepare for. Tiger tried to push the unsettling feeling to the back of his mind as the judge continued with the proceedings. But the moment she called for the case to begin, the tension in the room escalated. It wasn't the usual courtroom atmosphere of protocol and legal jargon. It was electric, with an underlying hostility that Tiger couldn't shake. Judge Thornwald's next words made his stomach turn. "Mr. Woods, I understand you're here to resolve a small matter, but what exactly do you think you're going to accomplish? You do realize the mountain of evidence against you, don't you?" Her eyes narrowed as she looked at him with a calculated coldness. Tiger could feel his pulse racing. He wasn't prepared for this kind of questioning. He had expected a legal battle, but this felt more like a personal attack. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, trying to maintain his composure. "Your Honor, I'm confident we can resolve this fairly." "Fairly?" Judge Thornwald cut him off. "There's nothing fair about the damage you've done. You should have thought about that before you started running from your responsibilities." The room fell deathly silent. Tiger's hands were clammy, his heart pounding in his chest. He had played on the world's biggest stages, but the weight of those eyes, the biting sarcasm in her voice, was something else entirely. He swallowed hard, attempting to steady his breathing. This was supposed to be routine. He had all the evidence to back him up. But somehow, the judge's words stung harder than anything he had anticipated. He was trying to keep his calm, but the words, "running from your responsibilities," echoed in his head, gnawing at him. Was she hinting at something more than just the case at hand? Was there something else he didn't know? His attorney, who had remained quiet up until now, leaned over and whispered urgently, "Tiger, just stay calm. Let's get through this. You've got this." But even his comforting words couldn't silence the nagging voice in Tiger's head. Then, out of nowhere, the judge dropped a bombshell. "Mr. Woods, I believe you've been hiding something very important, something that needs to be brought to light." Tiger's blood ran cold. His body froze. Was this about the case, or was the judge about to expose something even more devastating? The room felt suffocating, the air thick with uncertainty as Judge Thornwald's words hung in the balance. Tiger's eyes widened. What could she possibly know that he hadn't already accounted for? The briefest flicker of panic coursed through him, but he quickly masked it with a composed stare. The judge glanced at the papers in front of her, flipping through them with deliberate slowness, her gaze never leaving him. She looked almost amused at the confusion on his face. "You see, Mr. Woods," she continued, her voice icy, "while you may think this is just about this legal dispute, I assure you, it's far more serious than that." Tiger's throat tightened. He had expected the usual legal proceedings, back-and-forth arguments, evidence, testimonies. But this? This was something completely different. His lawyer shifted uneasily in his seat, glancing nervously between Tiger and the judge. "Your Honor, I don't understand." Tiger said, forcing his voice to remain steady despite the rising tide of anxiety. What exactly are you implying? Oh, you understand, Mr. Woods? The judge said, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. But perhaps you haven't fully grasped the magnitude of what's unfolding here. She paused, allowing the silence to stretch out uncomfortably. There are elements of this case that suggest there may be more to your actions than just a simple misunderstanding or negligence. Tiger's mind raced. What was she talking about? Had something in his past come back to haunt him? He'd lived under a public microscope for years, but this felt different. His hands began to shake, a subtle tremor he couldn't control. I've been investigating your financial history, Mr. Woods, Judge Thornwald continued, her voice cutting through the room like a knife. And it seems there are transactions, suspicious transactions that occurred around the time the dispute first began. The room felt like it was spinning. Tiger's heart pounded in his chest. He hadn't expected this. How could she have known about those transactions? He had done everything by the book, or so he thought. His eyes darted to his lawyer, who was now visibly sweating, his face pale. Your Honor, Tiger's voice cracked slightly, the weight of the moment sinking in. Those transactions have nothing to do with the case. They're private matters that were resolved long ago. The judge tilted her head, her gaze sharp and unforgiving. Private, perhaps, but they don't stay hidden forever, do they? Especially when someone is as high profile as you, Mr. Woods. Tiger felt a wave of nausea hit him. This was spiraling out of control. His past mistakes, the secrets he'd worked so hard to keep hidden, were suddenly coming into the light. Judge Thornwald's voice softened, almost pitying. Mr. Woods, you're no stranger to being in the spotlight, but I think it's time to face the full consequences of your actions, don't you? Tiger's chest tightened. His breath came in shallow gasps. This wasn't just a legal dispute. This was something much darker. As the judge leaned back, her gaze never leaving Tiger's, he was left reeling, unable to process the full weight of what was unfolding. How much of his past had she uncovered, and more importantly, what did it mean for his future? Tiger's mind raced, trying to piece together what was happening. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in as Judge Thornwald's words continued to echo in his head. The suspicion in her voice was undeniable. He had spent years trying to keep his past mistakes buried, but now they were coming to light in a courtroom full of people who were waiting for him to stumble. He could feel the weight of their eyes, each person silently waiting for him to crack. The judge's gavel slammed down, snapping Tiger out of his spiraling thoughts. Enough! Mr. Woods, I'm granting a brief recess for you to gather your thoughts, but I suggest you come prepared when we return. He nodded stiffly, unable to find the words to respond. The harsh glares from the courtroom made him feel like a caged animal. His attorney leaned in, his voice low but urgent. Tiger, we need to figure out what's going on with those transactions. We can't afford any surprises. You need to tell me everything. But it was too late for that. The damage had already been done. Every minute that ticked by felt like a countdown to disaster. He had prepared for a legal battle, something manageable, something he could control. But now, it felt like the ground beneath him was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. As they returned from the recess, Tiger stood tall, trying to hold on to whatever shred of dignity he had left. He had to face Thornwald, the woman who seemed determined to break him down. The judge didn't waste any time, her eyes locking onto his as soon as he stepped back into the courtroom. Mr. Woods, she said, her voice sharp, cutting through the silence. Let's address the issue that's clearly hanging over this case. Those transactions I mentioned earlier, the ones linked to a certain offshore account. I'm afraid they're not as innocent as you've led everyone to believe. Tiger's breath hitched. He hadn't been expecting this kind of attack. The walls felt like they were closing in faster than he could breathe. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His hands were shaking. This wasn't just a legal argument anymore. This was about his reputation, his very life being torn apart in front of everyone who ever believed in him. Thornwald's voice turned colder, and the courtroom seemed to lean in, waiting for the next devastating blow. Mr. Woods, if you're planning to try and talk your way out of this, I suggest you reconsider. I've been on this bench long enough to know when someone's hiding the truth. Tiger's heart raced. The truth? What truth? He had never been perfect, but he had never expected to be cornered like this. His entire life, his career had been about precision, control. But here now, in this room, everything was spiraling into chaos. Then, something snapped inside him. His body tensed, and his eyes locked on Thornwald's. He had to fight back. He couldn't just sit there and let her destroy everything he had worked for. I'm not hiding anything. Tiger's voice came out more forcefully than he intended. I've made mistakes, but I've always owned up to them. You can dig through every part of my life, Every transaction. But that doesn't change what's happening here. This case isn't about my past. It's about a wrongful claim against me, and I'll fight to clear my name." For a moment, the judge's steely expression softened just slightly. She studied him, and for the first time there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Was it respect, or was she just waiting for him to make another mistake? "Very well, Mr. Woods," she said after a long silence. "We'll proceed with the evidence you've presented, but mark my words, this will get much worse before it gets better." The tension in the room reached its peak, and Tiger could feel the storm coming. He had just made it personal, and now, with every passing second, the courtroom was about to erupt. As the judge prepared to call for the next piece of evidence, Tiger's gaze shifted to the door at the back of the room. His lawyer's eyes were wide, silently signaling to him. What was about to happen next? And more importantly, would it be the final nail in the coffin for Tiger's career? Tiger could feel the walls closing in around him. His breath was shallow and his heart thundered in his chest, but there was no turning back now. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation, each moment feeling like it stretched into eternity. His lawyer, still visibly shaken, leaned over, whispering words he barely registered. The weight of Thornwald's unyielding gaze was the only thing he could focus on. "Mr. Woods," she called out, her voice cold and commanding, "if you have any final defense, now is the time to present it, but be warned, this is your last chance." Tiger stood up from his seat slowly, his hands trembling. He had always been a man who thrived under pressure, who faced down challenges with confidence. But this was different. This wasn't a game of golf where a single misstep could cost him a tournament. This was his life, his reputation on the line. He glanced at his lawyer, but there was nothing but uncertainty in his eyes. Tiger turned back to face the judge, trying to steady himself. I've spent my entire life fighting for what I've earned," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, but the intensity in it was palpable. "I'm not a saint, and I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. But I've never done what I've been accused of here. I didn't steal anyone's idea. I didn't steal anything. But I will fight to my last breath to prove that I am innocent." The courtroom was eerily silent. Even the judge seemed to hesitate for a fraction of a second. But then her icy composure returned, and she nodded toward the prosecutor. "Mr. Reeves, continue with your presentation." But Tiger wasn't done. Something inside him snapped. This was his moment. If he didn't speak now, he might never get another chance. "I'll fight this, Your Honor," Tiger said, his voice growing stronger. "Not because I want to win, though believe me I do, but because I owe it to myself, to my family, to every person who's ever supported me, to prove that I'm not what they've painted me to be. You can throw as much evidence at me as you want, but I won't back down. I refuse to let this be my legacy." He could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on him. The prosecutor, the judge, the spectators, all waiting for him to break. But Tiger didn't. He stood tall, despite the crushing weight of the situation. He was trembling. But it wasn't from fear. It was from the raw energy of a man who had been backed into a corner, fighting for everything he had left. For the briefest moment, the judge's eyes softened, but the hard mask of professionalism quickly returned. She glanced down at the papers in front of her, her hands steady as she shuffled them. But then, just as she was about to speak, a sound from the back of the courtroom caught everyone's attention. A door slammed open, and Tiger's lawyer stood up with a gasp. He wasn't looking at Tiger, though. His gaze was fixed on something behind him. What had just happened? Who had entered the room? And more importantly, was it someone who could help Tiger? Or was this about to become the final blow to his already fragile defense? The tension in the courtroom was unbearable. As everyone turned toward the door, Tiger felt a cold rush of dread sweep over him. His breath caught in his throat, and for a moment everything felt surreal. Had someone new entered the room to add more weight to his already crumbling defense? The door slammed again, and the sound reverberated off the cold marble walls. The figure standing at the doorway wasn't what Tiger had expected. It wasn't another lawyer, nor a witness. It was someone he had hoped would never step foot in this courthouse again. His ex-business partner, the one person whose name had haunted him ever since their falling out. A man with a vendetta. He could feel his pulse quicken as the man's cold eyes met his, a small, calculating smile curling at the corner of his lips. It was clear he had arrived for one reason, to finish what had been started years ago. "Your Honor," the man's voice cut through the room, low and smooth. "I'm here to clear up some of the confusion." The judge raised an eyebrow, but she didn't seem surprised. She had anticipated every move from Tiger's side, it seemed, and now it was becoming clear that she had expected this disruption as well. The prosecutor, Reeves, stood frozen for a moment before quickly recovering. "This is highly irregular," he began, his voice filled with both shock and intrigue. Tiger's mind raced. What had this man come here to do? Was he about to expose a part of Tiger's life that had been carefully buried for years? His every instinct screamed to leave, to get out of the room before this went any further. But there was no escape now. He was trapped in this nightmare, and there was nothing he could do but face it, head on. As the man stepped further into the room, his words still fresh in Tiger's mind, Tiger tried to focus. His thoughts were a jumbled mess of regret, disbelief, and fear, but one thing was clear: the courtroom drama wasn't over. The judge leaned forward, her expression neutral. "Mr. Woods, you were going to say something before we were so rudely interrupted. Please continue." Tiger opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His thoughts were still reeling, trying to understand the depth of the betrayal that was unfolding before him. As the man's gaze locked onto Tiger's, the final, gut-wrenching question echoed in his mind. Would the truth about his past finally destroy everything he had fought to build? Or would he find a way to survive this relentless storm?